Hey, welcome to episode 7 of Daz Dee TV, and in today's episode we're going to be talking about how to get faster. Now, before we get into the show, I just wanted to share with you a little story that I have about a conversation I had with a tennis coach just a couple of days ago while we were having lunch. Now, I know he's watching because he's a fan of the show, and I did say that I would mention something about this. And he said, I'm really glad, Daz, that you took the time to talk about communication in one of your previous episodes. It was the episode where I was talking about masters and undergraduate degree students and how perhaps they're focusing too much on what to coach and the knowledge that goes along with that, and not enough time on learning about communication and how to coach and how to get your messages across. Now, I'm hoping that I can get that coach in a couple of episodes time so we can have a proper talk about it, and maybe even get a couple of university lecturers in so we can get some context from actually what's going on at the universities themselves. But the reason that I shared that with you is because I don't want to sound like a hypocrite, because I'm very aware that the last couple of episodes I've been talking about how to write an annual plan, how to write a strength training program, how to get your athletes faster. So there's a lot of knowledge-based information, and I know that we need to talk also about, well, if that's the information you want to get across, how do you actually sell that information to your athlete, and how do you make sure that you communicate in the best possible way? So we'll get to that in a few episodes. So for the coach that we had that conversation with, and I know you're watching, it's all good, we're taking care of it, okay? So just be patient. The other thing that he said, which was really interesting, was, hey, you know, one of the observations I have as a tennis coach is that there's a lot of S&C coaches now pushing down your neck their own personal brand. There's a lot of self-promotion going on, and his perception, and he wasn't necessarily talking about me or any of the coaches that I work with, but his perception was that maybe the S&C coach is more interested in personal self-promotion and getting behind the camera and videoing their athletes doing all of these things than they are actually staying in front of the camera, working with the athlete and looking after the number one concern, which is the welfare of the athlete themselves and making sure that they're okay. And I was really like, wow, taken back by that. And it was something for me that I really think we need to speak to in another episode. So again, great, interesting point, and we will talk about that soon. I guess the only thing I want to say about that now, because I want to be true to everyone who's watching, and I know that there's a few people watching. I got over 1,000 views of this last episode, so unless it's my dad who's been watching this episode 1,000 times, I know that there's a few people that are interested in what I've got to say, and it's really, really important to me that I'm authentic. And what I would say is that I can understand why S&C coaches now are more concerned with their own brand. I mean, you only have to look at the statistics I gave you in the previous episode. Looking at the UKCA, their own audit of its own membership, we found out that almost 20% of its members are doing S&C coaching on a voluntary basis. And I know that from looking at data from Sports Coach UK historically in the last 10 years, something like less than 3% of the coaches that they interviewed were working full-time in a professional paid capacity. So I can understand why people want to get noticed, why they want to promote themselves more, because we need to get more interest and attention on what we're doing if we want to stand out, because it's a very competitive market. There's 20,000 sports-related graduate students leaving university every year. There's not a lot of jobs. And if we can make ourselves better known and more familiar to a bigger audience, and we can reach out to more people by showcasing best practice and what we're doing, then I can understand that. But just to be truthful with you guys, the number one reason why I am doing this, the reason why I've been writing blogs on the website for the last 3 or 4 years, the reason why I'm now doing it more of a video blog, is because the number one thing that I love doing is learning. I absolutely love learning. There was a time when it completely overwhelmed me. There was a time where I was very, very stressed by the fact that I just could never have enough hours to try and really grasp and understand all of the knowledge that is out there. But now I'm comfortable with it, and I'm excited about it, and I love the fact that there's just not enough hours in the day to ever fully get on top of all of the information that's out there. So I love learning. But more than that, I absolutely love sharing the information that I'm learning about. If I can in any way kind of condense the information that I've learned and somehow put it into a training philosophy, a training system that can help other coaches to simulate that knowledge in a more efficient way and to help them better understand more quickly than I did some of the learnings that I've taken over my career, then I'm going to do that, and I love doing that. And it's enabled me to, in the first instance, help me to communicate, as we'll see in this case, examples of how the speed work that we're doing with the athlete is going to enable them to become a better tennis player or whatever sport they play. Then, as my career evolved, it enabled me to better reach out to my coaches that I was managing and to more efficiently help them to understand the way I wanted them to coach the sessions so they could better understand my training philosophy. And now, by doing the blog and by doing this video channel, I'm hoping that I can reach an even greater audience of coaches and athletes who might not otherwise get the opportunity to have this discussion with me, because you're not coming to train with us at APA, or you're not engaged in any kind of discussion with me. So this is an opportunity for me to share even more information to a wider audience. So that's me being true. And again, as I said, we'll talk about it in another episode. But it's really important for me to be authentic, and I appreciate the thousands of views that have already have taken place on the episode, and I hope that you'll stay with me on this journey. So let's get into the show. Let's talk about how to get faster, and if you can, just allow me a few minutes to set up this episode by talking about a definition of speed, because I can't really answer that question unless we all agree what type of speed we're talking about. So for me, and again, apologies you can't see this, but you're getting used to my ramble now, and I'll tell you the same thing as I tell you every time. These pictures will be on the blog that I write that goes along with the video blog, and they're just for me to refer to so I can remember what I want to say. So in terms of definitions of speed, if you come down to the bottom here, speed, the rate at which an object covers distance. So another way of saying that would be the time it takes for an athlete to cover a certain distance. And the classic example we give is the 100-meter sprint race, because it's very easy to calculate that quality of speed, because we know the distance is 100 meters and we know it's going to take them 9-point-something seconds to do it, so we can work out their speed in meters per second. For all the physicists out there that want to pick holes on definitions, let's be clear, velocity is a better use of the term because it considers direction. So you could be moving at a certain number of meters per second, but it could be forwards, sideways, backwards, diagonal, and that becomes more important when we start talking about first step speed, which we'll talk about in a second. And then obviously acceleration, which is a really important related component to speed. That considers the rate of change of speed. So when an object is at rest or it's moving at a constant speed, what we're more interested in knowing is, well, what happens when that athlete suddenly increases or decreases their speed? And that's really important in sport, as we know. So those are kind of the headline definitions. And when I'm talking about speed, I'm going to be talking about 4 types of speed. Okay, we've got straight ahead speed. A lot of people call this linear speed because it really speaks to the 100-meter race. Everyone's just running in a straight line. So whether you want to call it straight ahead speed or linear speed, I don't really care. But effectively, we're talking about 2 components there: the acceleration phase and then top speed. And if you want to be strict and call it 3 components, speed endurance phase as well. And we'll talk about that shortly. what's more relevant to the sport that I work in, tennis, first step speed. So this is really about getting off of the mark explosively. We're really talking about getting off of the mark over distances of about 5 meters in any direction. Okay, so it's different to straight ahead speed in that it can occur, that acceleration component can occur in any direction. And the other thing to bear in mind is that often first step speed is more concerned with a reaction to a visual stimulus. So there's more of a reaction and anticipation component to that type of speed, whereas straight ahead speed, head down in the blocks, the only reaction you have to have is to the starting gun. Multi-directional speed, more commonly referred to as agility, which is all about being able to minimize any loss of speed or balance during constant shifts in your body's center of gravity. Okay, so very, very important in tennis when they're moving side to side, changing direction. We then got a category that I call sport specific speed, and really this is a difficult one to describe in some respects, but I'm really talking about those specific movements that are unique to that sport, or movements that are part of a sport that don't necessarily fit nicely into the three that I've already mentioned. So in tennis, for example, there's quite a few unique movements in terms of how you get to the tennis ball, using combinations of side shuffles, crossover steps and running steps, for example, that you might not see in other sports. And in my experience, a lot of S&C coaches who've never worked in tennis before have to go away and study the game for quite a few weeks and months to get familiar with the particular movement steps that tennis players use to get towards the ball and then to get back to hit the next ball. And it's not just running based movements that they use, but actually more side shuffles and crossovers and things like that. So that's another type of speed. So hopefully that gives you a bit of an overview of the 4 types of speed. In terms of what does world class look like, I could talk about individual examples of what the best in the world do in different sporting contexts in each of these types of speed, okay? But for today, I'm going to focus on straight ahead speed because that's the type of speed that I think most people think about when they talk about speed. And again, apologies you can't see it properly, but what I've done here is I've printed off a graph, and this shows you the split times for a 100-meter sprint race. And at the top here, and by the way, these are different profiles for some of the best recorded sprint times ever in the world, from 1988 Olympics all the way to when Usain Bolt created the world record in 2008. I think it was 9.69 seconds, still the world record today. And what it's showing you is the time it's taken in seconds to achieve 10 meters. So at the beginning of the race, in the first 10 meters, from 0 to 10 meters, obviously you're having to overcome your own inertia and you're at complete rest. So it takes you over 1.8 seconds to get from 0 to 10 meters. And then what you'll find is that as you start to accelerate 10 meters, 20 meters, 30 meters, 40 meters, 50 meters, the speed that it takes you, the time it takes you to cover 10 meters goes down and down and down and down until the point where you stop accelerating, round about 50 meters for professional sprinters. And then what you're trying to do is hold on to that speed for as long as you can. And it's often said that the person who wins the 100-meter sprint race is the person who slows down the least, which speaks to this idea of you need to have really good levels of speed endurance and you need to be able to hold on to that speed. So, you know, someone like Usain Bolt was covering the 10 meters in less than a second, and he didn't really lose speed at all between 50 meters and 100 meters, and that's the reason why he's the best in the world. One of the things that was really interesting for me though, and it's just to compare the best sprinters in the world with the best tennis players. The fastest time for the first 20 meters recorded in the last 20 years was by Tim Montgomery, and he did that in 2002. It took him 2.83 seconds to cover 20 meters, granted off the starting blocks in reaction to a speed gun. Okay, and I haven't included the reaction time in that component. Interestingly, the all-time best that I've recorded for a tennis player to cover 20 meters, not off the blocks but off a stationary start and not in reaction to a gun, was 2.73. So the point I'm just making is that tennis players are actually outstanding athletes when it comes to accelerating over 20 meters. So yeah, that's a little bit of information for you. And then just to put that into context, the speed at which Usain Bolt was running at when he was covering 10 meters in 0.83 seconds is roughly the equivalent of 12 meters per second, or almost 27 miles per hour, or I've got it down here, 43 kilometers per hour. So that's the kind of speed that Usain Bolt was running at when he was at top speed. So it's a phenomenal amount of speed, and it's something that everyone in the world is in awe of, isn't it? Now, the only thing that I would just sort of say to you in terms of speed is, granted, when we're talking about this type of speed, it's very much a skill that you have to learn to maximize your running technique, but it has a hell of a lot to do with your genetics. And you know, a lot of these athletes are certainly born and then have to then spend a number of years just refining their talent so that they can have the most efficient running technique. And that's the reason why so many people have this belief that you can't improve speed. I think the reality is everyone can improve their speed. Everyone can improve their speed. It's just the fact that not everyone's peak performance will be good enough to be elite. So I can still improve my speed now at 36 years old, but I'm not confident that I will ever be capable of improving it enough that I could run 100 meters in under 10 seconds. And I don't think at any point in my whole physical career would I have been able to do that, because I just didn't have that genetic capacity and those fast twitch fibers to be able to do that. But that's a whole nother discussion, actually, talking about talent and nature versus nurture. But I can go on record and say that you do have to have a certain amount of talent and genetic capability to be able to run at these phenomenal speeds. But the last thing I do want to say in terms of how to get fast, though, and particularly as it relates to this kind of speed that we're talking about on the tennis court, where there is a reaction and an anticipation component, you've got to remember that it's far too easy to just make the connection that the reason that someone appears slow is because they don't have the physical capacities to actually make their muscle fibers go. Okay, there's actually, in any observation of any athlete, there's actually 4 things that you should be taking into account of. They're mental, physical, tactical and technical capabilities. And if you apply that to speed, it's exactly the same thing. Just think of it like this. Mentally, if you want to go as fast as possible, well, you better be 100% concentrated, and more than that, you better have that desire to want to go as fast as possible. So before you even think about evaluating someone's speed on the stopwatch, just take for a minute, ask yourself for a minute, are they actually mentally switched into this exercise? Do they actually want to give their best effort? Do they have the desire, and are they concentrated? Because one of the other things is that if you talk about an elite level tennis player, if they're concentrated and they're paying attention to their opponent's tendencies, where they like to hit the ball and what they're likely to do, they may appear way faster than another athlete because they're not reacting to the ball, they're actually anticipating, so they already know where to go. So not only mentally, but then yes, of course, physically, have they got the physical characteristics to actually recruit maximum number of muscle fibers in the shortest amount of time possible? And we know that's significantly related to their composition of fast twitch and slow twitch muscle fibers. But again, that can be trained as well with sensible training, which we'll cover in the next episode, okay, with the actual methods that we can use to help people get faster. Then think about it from a tactical point of view. If you are covering more distance than your opponent, then you're going to be slower. If one person was running 100 meters, but another person was running 105 meters, chances are they're going to be slower. But it's the same thing in tennis. If you don't start from the most sensible position on the tennis court, and you're not recovering to the right place every time, and you're therefore having to cover more distance, then you're going to appear slower. So where you start from is a really important point from a tactical standpoint. And then finally, technically, how much skill do you have in running efficiently? And a lot of the time that I speak to athletes, we talk about looking at what we call international norms. So how much distance should you be able to cover with a side step, a cross step and a run step? And make sure that the athletes are aware of these international norms so that they can actually move efficiently. So hopefully that's given you a little bit of an insight into what I mean by getting fast, and specifically getting fast in these 4 different types of speed. I hope you've also understood a little bit of information about what world class looks like, and I've given you a good example of the type of speed capacities that 100-meter sprinters have, and interestingly shown that tennis players are just as effective at accelerating as world class sprinters do. And then finally, getting you to consider the other reasons why athletes may appear slow, or the reasons why they appear fast, because of the mental, the physical, the tactical and the technical components that you need to incorporate into any good evaluation of any performance. So I hope you've enjoyed the show, and I look forward to speaking to you in the next episode. Have a good day.